of development. And it's not only on the monetary side, but also including the fiscal side. I think that's lacking here in Europe. And if you do that, we can have a common approach of the situation. We are trying to do the same thing as far as ECOWAS is concerned. As you know, ECOWAS groups, let's say, 15 countries with 300 million inhabitants. So, well, when we spoke about to have locomotive engine in the area, I think that can be countries, but also that can be economic groupings. So, well, what I would like to ask is that. Thank you.
Is there any question in the room, please? I think we have some microphones ready. So if we can have the microphones ready, I will come to you in a second. Donc si on peut avoir les micros prêts, je reviens vers...
If there are any microphones, I'll get back to you. Raise your hands. Alors.
I see many questions coming on Twitter.
That is a tricky question. Because, you know, I think one of my qualifications...
I was harassed through Twitter, this is why.
One of my qualifications for being selected for this position is because Guinea-Bissau is the smallest economy of the continent. But when you...
Don't be too modest.
But when you look into actually the conflict situation in Guinea-Bissau, I think it's very much what I was mentioning about Asia. There is a problem also of marketing. I'm not denying that there are difficulties in the country that has been unstable for quite some time. There is a force from ECOWAS that is trying to stabilize the country. But what you really notice is the genesis of these problems come from a number of factors. Some are internal, but some are external, like drug trafficking and the fact that it is influencing the entire coast, and just happens to be in a country that was, as I said, the weakest link, and therefore much more exposed to the kind of instability that is being provoked.
Thank you. Any question on the floor? Please introduce yourself and short question ending by question mark, please.
Thank you. I'm Benjamin Gonga, head of partnership of Oser Afrique, youth organization who is working for Africa. Let me push you in French because that's my modern language.
I was happy to see that we did indeed talk about this issue, or the approach that Mr. Lopez has adopted. There's just not one model to be followed, but that we want to come up with some kind of general African model. Now, I want to know whether we're frightened of having Chinese coming along to helping us. People say that they're colonizing us with their investments. What are we expecting as Africans to use our human resources in order to allow them to pick up the baton and ensure that this development is truly African development and not development, be it European, American or Chinese development in Africa? Prime Minister. Well, let me just add one thing. As Mr. Lopez has just reminded us, we shouldn't be frightened of China. I think that's the first thing I need to say. It all depends on our strength when it comes to negotiating with China. They should invest where we want them to invest. And we need to be able to lay down the conditions under which investments are made, as we do with Europe or anybody else. And I think that that's the issue. I think that the figures that Lopez gave us illustrate that actually it's not that much when you compare it to the overall needs. But I don't think it's a bad thing to have a diversification of investors in Africa. And I think the Chinese are more than welcome. They're more than welcome in Côte d'Ivoire. They're involved in the electrical sector. There's a dam being built, highways, and the mining activity, which is important for our country. Now, I agree with your point of view. Every time I take the floor, I say that investments should be national and international. And national investments are quite large, even if you look at each individual country. But if you look at investments of an African nature, I haven't got the latest figures, but still they're pretty high. In Côte d'Ivoire, I can tell you that the Nigerian banks are very present. I'm not plugging them, but you know most of these banks. But they're in Abidjan. South African banks our African banks, and they're there. They're also present. And when we launch calls for tender, African companies respond, and they're successful. So when it comes to the vision that we need, well, we need to, of course, take on board the existence of the other countries and what they're doing, but, of course, we need to turn this vision into a personal vision. We talked about African elephants at one point in Côte d'Ivoire. Why? Because some people talk about leopards, lions. Why not? Some talk about cheetahs. But okay, in Asia they talk about dragons. But we need to invent something for ourselves by taking on board what we can do. And I think that the driving force at the end of the day are the men and the women. That's our wealth. It's the ability that men and women have to analyze things, which allows us to change the situation. I said it for Asia. Look at Switzerland. I mean, they don't have any raw materials, but they played a huge role in development. But it's men and women, first and foremost. That is where we need to invest, in men and women. And I was talking with Mr. Lopez earlier on. We need to create universities which are not just national universities, but universities which will be regional in nature. We've got examples in Abidjan. We have the Félix Bourbonnet University, where you have people coming from the whole region. Let me give you another example. The Cardiology Institute in Abidjan, which has open heart surgery taking place. We have people coming from Southern Africa all the way to us to be operated on. Open heart surgery. So you see, that's what's important. It's the Africa of tomorrow that I'm talking about. We need to rely on the quality of the men and women we have. Thank you, Prime Minister. Yes, indeed. Well, the examples you've given, I think, are very illustrative. I'm thinking of what was said earlier on about Morocco. I think there are some examples like that in Morocco which are very successful, particularly when it comes to education and other areas. Donald, would you like to comment on Guinea-Bissau?
I have the microphone to answer a very short question of two things, which were coming quite often on the... Number one, in your country, Rwanda, when I went for the first time, I was very, I would say, attracted by the first publicity that you see when you exit from the airport. Investment, yes. Corruption, no. What should we do to eradicate corruption in Africa? And the third point, maybe also Angel Goya, you can think about the answer. How can we really empower more women in Africa? Because they are definitely part of the solution for growing Africa.
Richard, I think it was unfair to ask Carlos about Guinea-Bissau because... however, I think Guinea-Bissau is a very serious problem. But not simply Guinea-Bissau, Central African Republic. I was in Central African Republic a few months before the rebels came in the city, and I was appalled by what I saw. I think that country, which sits in the heart of Africa, unless we actually work together quickly to fix it, there could be huge, serious problems. Guinea-Bissau had problems, but now it has become a transit point for Latin American drug barons because the state is almost non-existent. But it is not simply a problem for Guinea-Bissau. Whenever you have got a fragile state, the big effect is the neighborhood effects. The huge spillover effects, whether it is refugees, whether it is criminals. So I think that in this story we're celebrating Africa, one of the big agendas we have absolutely to fix some of these semi-failed states. Because you don't, then you have got the Horn of Africa. You see what's happening in Somalia? It's not a problem for Somalia, it is a problem for the entire region of the Horn. So we're really concerned about Guinea-Bissau, as we are about Central African Republic, as we are concerned about Somalia. And I hope we can work, all of us together, in the African community, international community, to fix those countries. There are millions of people trapped in those countries, but there are also huge spillover effects on the neighborhood.
May I add something?
Yes,
as far as Guinea-Bissau is concerned? Because, well, before being Prime Minister again, I was Senior Minister of Foreign Affairs, working hard on the question of Mali and the question of Guinea-Bissau. And, well, as you know, the question of Mali has been, was interesting. Well, quite all of the world have been involved with the question of Mali. France, of course, and the other European countries. But as far as the question of Guinea-Bissau is concerned, well, I don't know if many of the people here know the question, but it's just a question of ECOWAS. And we are solving this problem only by ECOWAS government and the ECOWAS people. We have sent about 600 people there, the army of ECOWAS, to consider the situation and to fight drugs traffic there. And the financing has been done only by the states of ECOWAS. There is not a single dollar given by the world on that. People don't know the question. But we hope that by the end of the year, beginning of next year, we'll solve also the problem by having a presidential election as that has been done in Mali. So, well, as you have said, Mr. Kaberuka, I think we should have stability. If we want to have development, we have to solve this problem of instability in our region. And the question of Guinea-Bissau, I think, will be solved by the end of the year or beginning of next year. Thank you.
Thank you.
You asked me about Rwanda and how we fought corruption. Not just Rwanda. I think there are a few other countries. It really boils down to one simple element, which is not a miracle. There has to be leadership not prepared to tolerate corruption. It's as simple as that. And that leadership has to be at all levels. Because what we did in Rwanda was that at the beginning, 1994, nobody gave us a chance. But we decided that the best way to rebuild the country is, first of all, to build trust. Trust with the people. And to build trust with the people by showing that the limited resources available are being used for the benefits of everyone. And so build systems which basically do not accept that a corrupt person can get away with it. Now, in some countries, I think the mistake they make is that they fight corruption at very low levels, but tolerate it at very high levels. And immediately people see that there is a hypocrisy. But if leadership is prepared to fight corruption at all levels, beginning at the top, you build an institution, transparent institution, the people then become the policemen for the system. And I think that, as Carlos Lopez was saying, though, Africa is making progress on that too. We still have huge problems of corrupt institutions in many countries. But I think compared to 10 years ago, there is huge progress being made, but it cannot be made fast enough.
Secretary Goria, I would like to thank you for your hospitality. Thank you for making this forum possible. Thank you for having us with you. And maybe the final word, no, we are late and we have to, unfortunately, don't take any more questions. So maybe the final word for you.
Rather than the final word, I do intend to say a few more words throughout my life but I'll use them more sparsely from now on. I promise. I do want to thank you all. This is very exciting. This is very encouraging. This is very uplifting. This is very challenging. And we're working with issues that have to do with economics, we're having to do with the environment, we're having to do with social issues, employment, etc. But in the case of Africa, there's a big G word, which is the governance. We're working with governance issues, big time. And that includes the question of corruption. That includes the question of arm's length relationship. Peter, here you are there. You know, Peter was not only for transparency, but then he did the extractive industries initiative. And so he's an old warrior. And they've been breathing down our necks for many, many years in order to keep us on the straight and narrow. These issues that we have been discussing, they all come back and haunt us because we can do very well on the technical aspect. We can do very well on the design. If we do not get the governance issue, we will not succeed. You mentioned women. Well, here we just put out an initiative based on the 3 E's. Education,